Hi student, this is the poem A Psalm of Life that we are undertaking for last 2 days. We have had a discussion on observation of the poem, summary of the poem in the text, with diction. Now I think that there are some more points that we can undertake for our discussion. Now we are just going to make just an analysis of the poem, in which we can say that the poem is didactic and it is written with a view to counseling man. The poet seems to be a preacher who is giving some lesson to life. It is mostly normative speech that he has made. He is doing this kind of thing with certain kind of poetic intention, that a poet's duty is to prepare man for the challenge of life. So he is commanding human folk. As a commander is just to inculcate the self-belief in the soldiers to fight against the enemy. So the poet in this poem is making some didactic note with an intention to make human being upright and move further. We know that life is transient, and this view of life has made us sometime live within, or we become reluctant to do anything in our life, only because of the fact that we think that it is so transient that there is no benefit of doing anything in this life. We should spend our life without any work, because ultimately we find that nothing remains with the end of the life. And as it is so short, so we should just not be engaged with quarrels, fights, and struggles against others. But the poet is going to make a new Protestant philosophy before the people, by which he tries to make us laborious, and it is by labor and practice we can make our life an exemplary one. It could be a heroic by our toil and practice. And when we are excessively religious, we lose our interest in real action of life. We overstep this life and start thinking about the life to come. We straightway come to the last point, that life is moving to death. And so in between, we should remain inactive, and we should think about the better future that is to come after death. And when we follow this kind of ideal, we are simply no longer the same human being who has been endowed with lots of quality to improve our life. If this physical life is improved, naturally our religious life will also be improved. If this physical life is troublesome, our religious life will also be not enjoyable. So, if a person is not heroic, he spends his life just like dumb beasts which have been driven purposelessly, aimlessly. So, we can say that the poem is inspiring the reader to live actively without any lamentation of the past deeds. We have come across so many people in this world who are full with lamentation because they have lost so many things in their life. They think that their life is meaningless because there is nothing to do, and they are just living for the life when it will be spiritual or when he dies, because non-action can stop him committing from sin. And when we are in action, we are in a struggle, we commit some sins because we may harm others. And this feeling has led us to stop doing anything, because in this transient life, we are simply just to pass over this physical life. So, poet suggests us that we should not think about the past nor about the future, because these are far away from us. And maybe they have some role in our life to shape, but actually our present is only the real life, which should be taken with all seriousness. So, the poem is the manuscript of poet's thoughts and feelings. We can say that it is not a new thought that the poet has poured in this poem. We cannot say that he has some unique and exceptional idea to deliver through the poem. However, his style has been unique. His way of narrating the message has been unique. And he has made his viewpoint so lucidly that it has removed lots of our just suspicious ideas which have been implanted by some false perception of the life. So, he is not to accept the fact that life is a mere dream. He goes against this. He establishes the fact that life is not a mere dream. So whatever is just said, he is going to negate the thing and establishes the unique experience of life that he has gained. For example, life is real, life is true, and death is not the goal of life. So, he is just taking the viewpoint from the Protestantism, and whatever is the unique feeling of Catholicism has been very much deterrent for us to improve our physical life, because it is excessively religious. It is excessively talking about the post-life situation, and it ignores the real and struggling life where we are living at this time. So this viewpoint of religion has always been stopping us from taking some important and stern action to improve our physical status. And once we improve our physical status, we improve our religious status as well. Because there is a correlation between the physical status and religious status. Till we fulfill our physical needs, until we are physically more advanced, we cannot enter into the religious world, actually speaking. For example, a hungry man cannot concentrate just very positively on the God and goddesses. So here, if someone is saying that this physical necessity of thirst, hunger are to be avoided for our religious development, we should think that they are deviating us from the actual process of improvement from the physical life to the spiritual life. So the poet is also just taking the message of life as has been just presented in our Hindu philosophy, that sorrows and happiness are definitely to come, they are coming, they are shades of life, and at the shades and the sun are just recurrently coming in the life. We cannot stop it happening. It has its all due course to come and go. And it is almost the similar is the situation when we are just talking about just the happiness and problem or trouble of life. So as a critic, Randolph Huff describes it. The poem is a youthful declaration of independence from a pessimistic determinism, supported by the full weight of biblical authority. So now it has been the very much thought of the religious teacher to make people turn away from the very much care of physical world, that they could travel on the path of spiritualism for spiritual development. It has been taking place in almost all beliefs of religion. But it is through the reformation of idea, we have been always making some shady viewpoint kick off and adopting some positive or inspirational viewpoint, that this life itself will be enjoyable before we look for the enjoyment for the life to come. If this life is not made enjoyable, our effort to make the post-life enjoyable is simply a dream that is never to realize. So the theme of the poem is to incorporate Protestantism that states that earnest labor brings meaning to a difficult life, and we should wait for our result that we have done. So the very much analysis of the poem says that we are just the current which should always flow and flow and flow. When current stops flowing, all the related instruments stop functioning. So when our life stops, moving forward, everything, all aspects of life stop moving forward. So it is never possible to make only one wheel run and making another wheel stop. For just a successful movement, we need both the wheels run with equal speed. But here, our religious teachers have been teaching to make one wheel functional another will dysfunctional. End result, we have not achieved anything in this world, nor have we achieved anything in the afterworld. Because the way we have decided to run was not a correct way. When we move one step forward, naturally we are pulled back one step backward. So both the paces should move together. Both the legs should run together. That the force of one leg is helpful to make another leg run. And it is this cycle of and process of action which makes us move. So here it is just to make the life wily. It is just to make the life spicy. It is just to make the life full with enthusiasm, full with enjoyment, full with taste. Life is meant for living with all enjoyment, with all merriment, with all work that has been destined to be done. Now we are undertaking another aspect, and it is the last aspect and the most important aspect of the poem to talk, that is a structural device. We have already known that the idea which has been presented here through this poem is not a new one. We have been reading this kind of thing in different sources of our knowledge. But this poem has become a nice poem to remember on its structural device. That it is a religious poem, it is a sacred song or hymn of the biblical book of Psalm used in Christian and Jewish worship. So we find that the religious books contain lots of psalms, just dealing with the meaning of life, dealing with our relation with God, and dealing with the value of love and so on. So there is no dearth of psalms written in the religious text. Likewise, we can say that this poem also is a psalm. It is a hymn which has been by and large described in the biblical book. And so there we find the tone remains didactic. It is what the religious tone is. It is never suggestive. Doctor's tone is suggestive, and he thinks it is by suggestion that he can make someone convince, follow his instruction. That is equally important for his well-being, for his good health. But here the religious teacher is another kind of personality. He says that most of the people are unknown of just a theme of religion. They are not knowing what is right and what is wrong. So they should be directed. And when we are directing someone, we should make a statement which is just based on didactic tone. So the poem consists of biblical verses, or it is also going to have prosaic Puritan style. The numbers and the Psalms allude to the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. So first we have explained the nature of the poem that Longfellow has written. We can say it is didactic. It has so many allusions from the biblical text, and it is by and large a religious hymn, we can say, but with a very direct just a functional poem for the people to make their life worth living. Now we are coming to another aspect of the poem for which it becomes different from the prose, that is rhyming. And we find that the poem is written in the rhyme style of ABAB. It simply means that the first line is rhymed with the third line, and the second line is rhymed with the fourth line in each stanza. Here we know that the poem consists of 9 stanzas of 4 lines each. So it seems to be a little bit longer poem, and though it is longer, but it is lyrical. It is just to be sung, because there are so many items of music which have been just kept into this poem. Rhyming is itself a musical trait that the poet has added here, and we can say that the stanza form is also almost of the same nature. So it is just to be described in terms of the musical poem, which is written into trochaic meter. We can say that when a long syllable or a stressed syllable is followed by a short or unstressed one, it is known as trochaic. So a stressed syllable being followed by unstressed syllable is very much a trochaic meter. We find that there are so many sentences which are the examples of imperative sentences. We can see the very first line is here, starting with the verb tell into V1 form, that makes the sentence an imperative one. So a kind of direction, a kind of order has been passed to the reader. And another important point of the first line itself is that it strikes the positive keynote of the poem, that the poet is not going to accept what has been told. He is always rejecting and rejecting. So he rejects, he cleans up everything which has been established but is out of practice, and he is keen to establish the thing which should be in practice for improvement of our life. We should notice that some of the schemes of figure of speech have also been resorted to. Now there are so many examples of allusion, that is an indirect reference of a person and place, thing or idea of the historical, political and literary importance. Now the opening line, tell me not to mournful numbers. The number refers to the chapter and section of the Bible. We can say this word has been taken from the Bible. So there is an indirect allusion that you find into the poem. Another scheme that the poet has used here is assonance, in which a vowel sound is repeated, as always repeated in lives of great men, all reminds us. So you find in lives, great men, us, are the words which contain a vowel, and that vowel is repeated in the sounds of all these words. And similarly we can see E vowel is repeated in still achieving, still pursuing. So here we have cited the example of assonance by which the vowel sound has been repeated. Now we can also find that imagery is also very much used in this poem to make reader know or perceive things with their 5 sense organs. There are just some abstract ideas although we are just using words, but simply words are not enough to create an image of the idea in our mind because of its abstract nature. So we try to use some visual imagery that helps us conjure and make mental images. Just we can find in the walls broad field of battle. Now life has been described here. The world has been described here by this imagery of battle. And we can find that the life is another name of battle. So life has been just visually perceived by this word battle. And the footprints on the sands of time and our work's significance has also been visually presented. It is just like walking on the sands, which is itself the passage of time. And as we find that on the sands we leave lots of footprints, and the man who comes later becomes sure of the traveler who has gone ahead. Similarly, it is just on the sands of time, our works are imprinted, and our significant work is known by the people to come. So it is what imagery is. And personification is also a very successful figure of speech by which the poet gives human quality to the inanimate objects, such as soul has been personified in the line, was not spoken of the soul. Here the poet thinks that we speak of some features of the human being, and we try to understand that human being simply because of the features that we have described. So the soul has been just treated as human being, and whatever has been spoken about the soul is not acceptable to the poet. So here the personification of soul has been made. Now we can talk about anaphora, that is repetition of a word or expression, as we find so many sentences have been repeated about life, such as life is made, in the line life is real, life is earnest. Here you find to explain the life, several lines are repeated, several lines are said, which are simply the examples of anaphora. And alliteration or consonance is also the technique here also the poet has used, by which he has repeated the consonant sounds as ruin, a forlorn and a shipwrecked brother, and no enjoyment and not sorrow. So no of no and no of not are repeated, and raw sound is repeated in the word like forlorn and shipwrecked and brother. So here you find these sounds are, consonant sounds are repeated. Now we are going to talk about another kind of figure of speech, that is paradox, which is just a contradictory statement, but it is a true one. And we can also say that by paradox we see the things just in a quite different way, and things are not what they seem. It is just the contrast between appearance versus reality that the poet has taken example of paradox also. And lastly he has taken just resort to parallelism too, in which you find the components and ideas which are grammatically of the same significance or of the similar construction, having same sounds and meaning and meter, but just they are kept again and again with certain purpose to emphasize certain specific idea, as life is real is paralleled with life is earnest, and still achieving is parallel with still pursuing. So these are the structural components which are same in their significance, but they have been kept together. They are kept in parallel because the idea is to be emphasized here. So we find that these are important things to remember. Thank you.